The Lunar Guardsman. By Krimmer. For even the very wise cannot see all ends. Poster's note. If you see ads on this video, it is from the website. I have not monetized this channel. And remember, if you like this video, go to the links and give the writer a upvote and the view count. End poster's note. Twilight Sparkle. Twilight jumped off the small nimble wagon before it came to a complete stop as they reached the campfire. The Everfree was as dense as ever, and the afternoon sun barely managed to wiggle its rays between its canopy unscathed. Shining and his royal guard had made it here first. Princess Celestia had them lead the way as she, Twilight, and the smallest retinue of Solar Guard followed behind. Until they had spotted the fires. That was when Princess Celestia said, "Twilight, stay with the guards," and teleported away in a flash so clean it made her feel like the amateur she was. Twilight frantically looked around as her hooves touched the dirt, not knowing what she expected. Her nerves were almost shot, the anxiety, stress, and fear of the last 2 days culminating to this moment. She immediately spotted a ring of anxious royal guards surrounding a small group of bipeds like Rigdan, only smaller. They were dressed in gunked-up, baggy uniforms in brown and green splotchy colors for camouflage. She examined their hands, empty of anything that could even be misconstrued as a weapon, and her magic relaxed. She had been preparing to cast a shield, she pretended without realizing. She forced her magic to dissipate completely, and her eyes to move away from the monsters that had tried to take her friends and family. Princess Celestia was right there, her presence illuminating the forest to something almost tame, kneeling next to a darker form. She saw Rigdan, his armor scarred and torn, standing across her on legs that almost bent. She saw royal guards, medics, and doctors, buzzing from wagons to ponies. She spotted flashes of orange and yellow coats, and she rushed forward. "Twilight," a sleepy voice said from the side, and she stopped. Shrouded in an oversized blanket, holding a steaming cup, Spike took a step towards her. It was quite a few minutes later that she extricated herself out of Spike's near-death grip. The baby dragon had been beside himself with joy and relief to see her. Twilight doubly so. In between the tears and the hugs, so many hugs, he had tried to tell her of his adventure, and how glad was she that he thought of it as such. Well, he tried. Really tried. The shock and stress caught up with him, aided by the full belly and warm chocolate drink he was provided with, and he had nodded off pretty fast. Using her magic, she wrapped him in his blanket and carried him off to a wagon where Apple Bloom was already lying and asleep. "How is she?" Twilight whispered to the royal guard standing next to it. "The filly?" the guard asked. "Pretty distraught, I think. She woke up when we arrived, and apparently that was the first she had seen of her sister. Got her going pretty good, I think. Had to make her drink a little extra calming, you know." The guard made a sipping motion and winked. "I think she'll be better off when she sees her sister all cleaned and taken care of. Can I see Applejack, please? Where is she?" "Oh, the guard turned left and right. They've already been whisked away, I think. They're gone." Twilight squawked. The guard shushed, nodding frantically at the wagon behind him. "Yes siree, Twilight ma'am. First wagon outta here. I think they were hurt enough to send them out earlier than not. The princess thinks so too. The captive injured are almost ready to be shipped out themselves. Just got to think about how to guard them all the way home. Make sure they're not any kind of slick, that's what I think." The guard flapped his wings a couple times to momentarily gain some height. "Princess Luna is with your friends too, something about her horn being overloaded, I think that's what the med said. We'll take our time with the rest, make sure it's all done safely and secure." "Is that what the princess said, or what you think?" Twilight asked. "I think. Not what I think, what I think the princess said." "You think a lot." Mama raised a thinker. "Oi, can you cover my post?" the guard asked another unicorn passing him by. I need to tell the princess that both kids are asleep, she's asked for constant updates. I think we'll see you at the castle then, Miss Twilight? I'll guard the kitties with my life, don't worry. Thank you. Give me a shout if either them wakes up, Twilight said, minding her volume as she left. That pony was a bit exasperating to talk to. At least that's what Twilight thought. Good stars, he had her going too. Twilight, it's so great to see you again. Rarity sobbed as Twilight rushed to hug her. No, darling, please, I'm dreadfully dirty and scant wish to do. Twilight hugged her anyway. She didn't care about the dirt, or the sweat, or the faint metallic tang clinging to Rarity's coat. Rarity was warm and alive and trembling just a little, and that was all that mattered. I'm so happy you're all safe, Twilight didn't mean for her voice to crack so hard. The last 2 days more than 2 days finally caught up with her all at once. Rarity gave her one last fierce squeeze before pulling back. Come now, darling, all we pretty much had was an intense jaunt in the woods. I could practically write a book on being briefly full-napped and turning out fine. The little sweetlings and I were always perfectly safe. Twilight swallowed, before muttering, I wish the others were as fortunate. Rarity hesitated, just a fraction. They'll be fine, Twilight. Small aches and pains, I assure you. Twilight shook her head. No, the Lunar Guard. She stopped herself, heat rushing to her cheeks. Never mind them for now. Your head, how'd it get? Rarity's expression sharpened. Twilight? What do you mean? Who else is hurt? Twilight felt her throat tighten. Please. Later. When we're in Canterlot. I'm begging you. Rarity studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right, darling. Her voice was steadier than her eyes. At least tell me how Cast Iron is. Was he hurt too, badly? Twilight tried to blink back the rising tears. Rarity closed her own eyes briefly, then inhaled and offered a brave, brittle smile. Never mind. I can know later. Twilight watched her straighten, visibly squaring her shoulders, and felt a familiar ache bloom in her chest. You should probably go to Rigdan, Rarity said after a moment. He really came through, Twilight. I lost track of him in all this commotion. I already saw him, Twilight said, gesturing. He's over there. Kicking away all aid and interviews. She paused. He didn't seem to want to talk much. Does he ever? Rarity said lightly. He usually likes to lecture when he's right, Twilight replied, swiping a hoof across her eye as if adjusting her mane. Rarity gave her a knowing look, then sobered. I'm going to take a wild guess that he didn't tell you who full-napped us. Twilight glanced toward the corralled bipeds encircled by royal guards. They're over there. What else would he need to tell me? The guards stood rigid, spears leveled, though Twilight could see the tremor in more than a few grips. Rigdan alone had been enough to unsettle the palace guard. Faced with several more bipeds, most of them looked like they were bracing to be part of one of the old castle stories. Rarity carefully explained everything she knew. The purple-maned unicorn passed her the incredibly well-preserved book, letting her examine it. Twilight turned the pages carefully, treating it as a precious relic, while Rarity kept talking. A hoof pointed at each of the bipeds, naming them as much as Rarity could. The last one to point was the golden-maned biped in the middle. He rested his arms on his knees, his stare glued to Rigdan. Twilight returned the book to Rarity, and marched off. Twilight went in front of the guarded full-nappers, stopping just behind the guards. She leveled her stare at the golden-maned man, and kept it there. He glanced at her momentarily, before returning his attention to Rigdan. A minute later, he looked at her again. There was curiosity in his eyes now. Maybe, recognition? There was something about his eyes. The way he looked at her, the way he took in everything around him. She had seen that before. In Princess Celestia's eyes, when twilight was young, when the princess would lower the sun and raise the moon. In Rigdan's eyes, when she would wake up at night and find him staring at the walls in the dark. But in him it was as if it was permanent, as if his being was defined by what emotion, what thought, lived behind these eyes. Twilight found herself pushing through the guards to approach him. There was noise. The guards, arguing against her doing so, some of them maybe trying to pull her away, but not trying too hard. Rigdan was right there, of course they wouldn't, and she was perfectly capable of pushing through even if they tried. At the corner of her eyes, noticed but like in a haze, Rigdan stood slowly. Princess Celestia turned and watched. But it was like a dream, like, it didn't matter, like there was no decision, no voluntary process. Much like her decision to approach them. There hadn't been any, or if there was, it had been made long ago. Now there he was, sitting on the frozen dirt in front of her. The shadow of naked trees played across his face, a cold breeze stirred his golden hair just as it pushed lavender strands in front of Twilight's face. She noticed there was dried blood there, and even more underneath a bandage on his temple. He kept his gaze on her, waiting. He was so small, comparatively to Rigdan. In her mind, ever since she heard of him, he loomed equally as large or larger. She never actually imagined what his face would look like, but it wasn't this. Not as inoffensive. Twilight looked at the others. 3 were laid aside, medics and guards around them, but the rest congregated around their leader. 2 males and a female. Twilight examined the female, a small sense of wonder peeking through the fog that occupied her. Her features were more curved. Her size was so much smaller, her shoulders almost dainty. Her fingers attracted Twilight's attention. Thin, so thin, almost tender-looking. Her skin was unmarred, invitingly soft. Her mane hair short, with no hint of any other growing on her apart from the top of her head. Such a sharp contrast from what she knew of Rigdan, and even the 3 males around her. But it was him that she came here for. The golden-maned one. The one who was her adopted father's best friend. The one who was by his side for so long. The one who grew with him. The one who abandoned him. Who tried to take Spike. Apple Bloom. Rarity. He stared back at her, his gaze unwavering against Twilight's piercing gaze, with a patience that he appeared to be able to hold for hours if need be. Twilight spat on his face and left. Any small voices asking if what the golden-maned man had done was that much different from what she did, were swiftly drowned. Twilight hugged Rigdan. "Are you okay?" she asked as she pulled back. Rigdan sighed. "Why does everybody feel the need to keep asking me that? I am fine." A drop of fresh blood dripped from the base of his left glove. Twilight hummed in contentment. Happiness, even. This kind of uniquely Rigdan normalcy was what she needed. She rubbed her face against his, ignoring the crusted remains on his cloth facial cover or the smells coming from it. "Is he okay?" she asked her brother as she climbed down. Shining Armor had been talking to Rigdan, looking dejected, annoyed, and nettled. "He's moving around, so not hurt enough to fall down dead anytime soon," Shining Armor said through his teeth. "Twilight, can you talk some sense into him? These people had some powerful weapons, Rigdan took them, and he won't tell me where they are or give them to us." "Why not?" Twilight asked, turning to Rigdan. Rigdan crossed his arms. "Because they are dangerous, yes. We noticed." "And just what sound and deductive argument will you give Princess Celestia for you to maintain custody of them?" Twilight asked. She then waited. Rigdan sighed with no small amount of phlegm, arms and shoulders dropping fine. "I'll hand them over." "Thank you." Shining Armor said to Rigdan and turned to Twilight. "I've been saying the same thing over and over, he just doesn't listen to me. You find it oodles of fun messing with my brother, don't you?" Twilight noted. Rigdan's chuckle was musically mischievous. Shining armor sputtered in place. Wagga! Well, buck you too, then. Just, bring the damn things to the princess or me at the castle, okay? He turned and left, muttering under his breath. Twilight watched him go until he was far enough. So, she said, turning to face Rigdan again. Why not? Oh, he knows why. Every time he wanted into Cadence's pants I was the one getting dick. No, Twilight interrupted him, knowing he was trying to sideline her. Why not him? Out of all you have hurt for one reason or another, after what he's done to you. Why forgive him with a slap on the head? Rigdan didn't answer right away. He looked past Twilight's shoulder, toward the guarded bipeds. Toward the golden-haired man sitting in the dirt, still staring at nothing. Then past him, further still into the trees, into the dark, into somewhere that wasn't here. I didn't forgive him, Rigdan said finally. Twilight frowned. Then. I just didn't do anything about it, he corrected. There's a difference. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, waiting. Rigdan shifted his weight. I would have thought you'd be happy with me for doing this. For not hurting people. I am. I am not sure I understand why you would do that. She was satisfied. Not happy, it would be hard to be happy for the full nappers when her loved ones were taken, but to know that Rigdan did not, for once, commit the fullness of violence to its limits, that had been a relief. But then the questions came. Including why now, why him, what had Twilight been doing wrong all her life? Rigdan had turned his head. Him and the golden-maned man were staring at each other from afar. I think they put me to a vote, Rigdan muttered. Pardon. When they left me behind, Rigdan specified, breaking eye contact with the man to turn back to Twilight. I always thought they had just decided to do so as a group. I never thought they might have voted. Twilight's eyebrows rose up. She couldn't imagine that they'd have made such a decision any other way. I'm asking myself now, what did Scipio vote for and what did the others do? Obviously the majority was to leave me behind, so what were the other options? Don't, of course. But what if they had voted on killing me instead? A small gasp escaped Twilight. She glanced back at the man, feeling an immense, sickening wave of revulsion. If the vote was on killing me and they didn't, Rigdan let the words linger. To Twilight it sounded as if. Would Rigdan have preferred his friends to kill him rather than abandon him? She imagined the context, the loneliness that must have followed, the struggles alone, all the reasons she viscerally loathed that man who was now looking at them. Would she have preferred a death in his stead? Maybe. But, was it wrong to hope that Rigdan might have felt now that what happened was the better choice? That as hard as it had been, it at least led him to her, to them? Wiping his mouth with his gloved hand, Rigdan continued. If they had, then many lives would have been saved. Oh! Not lives, plural. Twilight knew immediately that Rigdan was only thinking of one life. One little girl. If he had done that. If he voted right. I can forgive voting to abandon me. But if the vote included the option to kill me and didn't vote kill, or did but went with the vote instead of doing what had to be done, if he fucking caused her to, Rigdan stopped himself. But you, he said, pointing at Twilight, would prefer it if I had hurt him either way. I never said that. Twilight protested. I was only asking. But you wouldn't be upset if you had come and seen him worse for wear. Or in that pile. Twilight turned to the direction Rigdan nodded towards. A row of bodies arranged shoulder to shoulder, sheets draped over them. An empty wagon was being arranged before them for collection. She opened her mouth, but couldn't bring herself to answer him. Rigdan lowered his hand that had been pointed at her. There was a strange look in his eyes. How is Luna? He asked. Some pony mentioned a cracked horn. I assume she must have drained herself beyond exhaustion magically. It's basically an early sign of horn rot, the same as when Sea Breeze had it happen to her. She'll need to avoid using her magic for quite some time, Twilight supplied eagerly, no longer wanting to remain on the previous subject. How long? Twilight could see Princess Celestia was still next to her sister's prone form, quietly talking to a doctor. Luna had already been strapped to a gurney, and ponies were making ready to move her. It was considered a fair wager that Princess Celestia would be right by Luna's side during the return trip. I can go ask them. I'm asking you. How long? Rigdan demanded. Twilight pouted. It was all a guess, and she didn't appreciate how Rigdan's impatience correlated with his more unfortunate decision-making. Maybe a year. The patient's age is a large factor, with younger ponies healing in almost half the time that ponies 10 years older would. Although, Princess Luna being in her physical prime despite being a millennia old works in her favor, she stopped as soon as she realized Rigdan hadn't really been paying attention. Rigdan? Should I be worried? Rigdan glanced at her sharply, but almost immediately a smile twitched up the corners of his mouth. No. Sorry, little one, just, he rubbed his eyes. It's obvious it's time for a change, that's all. I'll bring the weapons over to Celestia, see what the plan is, and then stay here to make sure nothing goes wrong. You stick with Little Flame, all right? Make sure he doesn't wake alone. Asterisk. Alexander. Alexander's fingers paused before wiping the spit on his face. He put his hand back down, letting the offense stay. It might make that young alien girl feel better to see it there. It was deserved, too. He kept his attention on John as much as he could. It was hard, and not just because of the slugginess of his thoughts. Body language was the only reliable source of information Alexander currently had. The alien locals around them should be considered inscrutable for the most part. How could he be assured he translated anything correct when he lacked the cultural context? Sure, they seemed to be very wary of him and his team, but it would be foolish to assign that to the short impact Alexander and his team made. No, he could only rely on what he could glean out of John. John, who very studiously, stayed far from them and wouldn't trade another word. John, who, unless Alexander was extremely wrong, was intensely deliberating. He spared a few minutes scrutinizing the large female who had to be another queen. Her aurora hair befitted the mark on her sides too conveniently to not be the case. Alexander endeavored to be cautious as his eyes followed her around. But the newly arrived queen seemed to have spotted him doing so easily enough. If that frown in his direction meant anything, she wasn't happy. Minutes passed. The two wounded alien females that had escorted John were moved out first. Aid was given to the children, then the white female, then John. When the turn of their own wounded came, Alexander let out a sigh of relief. The locals appeared to genuinely worry over William, Linda, and Derry. New clean bandages were provided for both him and Liam. The local medical personnel even seemed to take in Jacqueline's broken arm with a large degree of agency at finding something serious yet actionable. Finally, a couple of carts were moved near them. The locals moved the three most wounded of his people on them. A brief attempt at helping by Alexander, Victor, and Liam, were cut off swiftly by a number of spearheads. So they sat back down, hands in the air, and watched the locals carefully load up his wounded people. He wondered why they were so hesitant to use magic. He'd have expected them to simply pop them up on the cart with a glow, but they wouldn't. Alexander attributed it to reluctance to use magic for something so mundane. Except he had watched the people in the village. Even now, some of the armored locals used magic to move crates around or even hold their weapons aloft by their side. Alexander chalked it up to missing a very important cultural context. Their turn had come, and they were up on a cart as well, guards around them walking next to them as the carts finally started moving. They were in the very back of the train that formed. Alexander watched as a few locals were left behind, a couple of them killing the fires, the rest loading up the bodies of his dead. Not important enough to delay the rest of them. The dead had all the time in the world. He wasn't sorry at all to leave this damned forest behind. But he cursed every meter they took north, the pain of the gate increasing. They were well on the way when John matched pace with them and climbed on the cart, sitting next to Alexander. Alexander could feel the thumping of the gate that had grown stronger now slowly secede as they turned west and left it behind. It had been so close. I thought about your offer, John started plainly. Offer? Victor asked loudly. Jacqueline put her arm on his shoulder and had him lean down so she could whisper urgently in his ear, Victor frowning as he listened. Right, Jacqueline had been present when Alexander talked to John. It had slipped his mind. John waited a beat, probably anticipating some objection from Victor or someone else. When none came, he continued. I'm taking it. Selene and I are coming with you, as long as you keep your side of the deal. You get your lot to keep her safe, unharmed. No experimental crap, no hurting her, no pestering her, or I will find a way to make your employers pay. You keep up your side of the deal and you get me and everything I have seen or know, and I can make it worth your while. I'll even work for your bosses if they need me to. Heavens know I'll be doing a better job than your lot. Jacqueline's hand was on Victor's chest holding him back and silent before John had even finished talking. Liam was trying to catch Alexander's eye as he shook his head in protest as covertly as he could. No problem, Alexander accepted. I will only add 2 terms. First, when we're to cross the gate you will agree to be unconscious. Either get your hands on some drug or we just knock you out, but it has to be this way. Victor smirked, happily. John frowned. No. I'm not. You're the one who didn't want to know how the gates work, Alexander reminded him. John's lips twisted in an ugly grimace. Fine, he spat. What's the second term? We all go through the gate together. None of my men are left behind, and we wait until they are well enough to make the trip. Alexander emphasized this last term strongly. He'd have John wait even if that wasn't the case. He himself needed the rest, and he didn't want to leave this world behind before he had a chance to give fair warning to the local rulers about what laid out there. John nodded. All right. Easy enough. I will need some time to arrange everything either way. We'll probably have you kept in the castle's dungeon. It's easy enough to get you out of there, but she might always try to make it hard for me. And I guess I'll have to get some supplies too. We won't need them if it all goes well, but sure. Better safe than sorry. Alexander rubbed at his brow when all he wanted was to massage the entirety of his aching scalp and lie down and sleep. It will give you more time for goodbyes too, I suppose. Alexander closed his eyes, letting the dark soothe him, but then he realized. There had been no reply of any kind. No acknowledgement. More time for goodbyes, Alexander repeated, watching John carefully now. That matters, no. The cart creaked as it rolled over uneven ground, making a little jump. Somewhere to their sides one of the guards coughed loudly. John was not answering. He did not shrug, did not scoff, did not insult, joke, or deflect. He simply sat in front of them, elbows on his knees, helmet on his head, staring at the scenery passing them by. Alexander felt the old familiar wrongness settle in his gut like a swallowed stone. Did you hear me? Alexander asked. John nodded, just barely. And? Nothing. Alexander tilted his head slightly. He had known the man since he had been a boy. He had learned over the years, the good and the very bad, that John's silences were never empty. They were always filled with something. Anger. Sulkiness. Fear. This one was with shame. You are not planning to tell them, Alexander said. John's fingers twitched as he sat, cracking his knuckles inattentively. Jacqueline spoke from Alexander's side. You can't just not tell them, she said, an ache in her voice. An exhale sounded from the inside of the metal helmet. It's complicated, John replied. Bullshit, Victor said. Alexander laughed, the laughter scraping his throat, his very soul on the way out. He had to laugh. Any other reaction was not allowed to him. John's eye flicked at them from behind the metal, the red one remaining unmoved. There's no point upsetting them more until... Until what? Jacqueline interrupted. Until you vanish. Victor was shaking his head from Alexander's left side, disgust in his face. John's shoulders stiffened. Until everything is settled. Settled, Alexander repeated with a chuckle. He tasted blood in that last pearl of laughter. And when exactly were you planning to include Selene in this settlement? It just struck me that she hasn't even gained consciousness yet from what I've seen, so you couldn't have talked to her. I should have noticed earlier. So? Would you tell her after she crossed the gate? And what about the dragon and that spirited purple girl? Or are you just going to, not be there one morning when they wake up? John did not answer. No sees Cabrin. Dislo, Victor spat. I don't need you giving me fucking advice. John growled at Victor. He pointed at Alexander, hand shaking with temper. And I don't need permission. There it was. Alexander leaned back slightly, as if reassessing the structural integrity of a building he knew was due to collapse anyway. No, you never do. John bristled. You think I don't know what this looks like to you? What you're thinking? But I have my reasons. You're going to break that little dragon's heart, Jacqueline almost whispered. He loves you. You have a family here, and you're not even going to give them the dignity of knowing. They'll be safer, Alexander and John chorused together. Alexander chuckled again, the smile not reaching his eyes, as John turned to him, his head pulling back as if punched. There it is, Alexander said with satisfaction. He could imagine John's brow furrowing under the helmet. There what is? The usual lie you convince yourself with that the pain you cause is worth it. Alexander said. His voice was as level as he could keep it, but even he could sense the serpent coiling behind it. Makes it easier, especially when you won't be here to watch them wonder why they didn't deserve to know, why you abandoned them. John jolted the cart with his sudden rise. A couple of guards shouted in alarm but quieted fast when they saw it was not the prisoners who had moved. Victor had tensed immediately, half rising before Jacqueline forced him down with her good arm. Sit down, Alexander told John, quietly. You don't get to talk about families, John growled, addressing all three of them. Not when you lot. Oh, I do. Alexander snapped, rising himself now. The world narrowed to the space left between them, the paltry meter or two, the clamor of the guards and his own men fading in the background. Because I lost mine. All because of you. And now here I am watching you throw away your second one like it's excess baggage. What, destroying your first one was not enough? John's hands unclenched slowly. He became hauntingly still. You fucking consider it a sacrifice or something? Alexander demanded. He struck at the thick plate at John's chest, his hand slicing on the sharp edges of the gouges there, but did not care. This isn't sacrifice. This is fucking cowardice. This is you framing your pain as greater to avoid facing theirs. This is your fucked up facade of safety overriding their choice. There is no choice. John shouted. You think they'd just let me go? You think that Selene would agree to leave her family for her own safety? Alexander's eyes burned. Then maybe, he said, the serpent finally striking, you should at least be straight with the fact that you don't love them enough or care enough to trust them with that choice, you fucking traitor. Silence slammed between them. John was breathing hard, his chest rising up and down, his fists shaking. Alexander thought he might actually attack him, and he almost welcomed the notion. It would be more vindication. It would clear the lines. You don't understand, John finally said, shaking his head. Alexander smiled, as unkindly as he never had before. Oh, I do. You found someone's, better than a purpose, and you'd rather break off a piece you can keep than ever risk losing it all. It's what you do. Isn't this why you left Vivian in a fucking box, scratching endlessly until she rots, rather than give her peace? That did it. But John did not lunge at him like he wanted. It was calmer. A single step brought their faces an inch apart. Your sister died crying that she'd never see home again. The whisper was as loud as a nuke, and it set Alexander off. Eyes now seeing red, it was he of the two who attacked. Arms behind tried to hold him back, accompanied by shouts to stop. Alexander noticed none of it, too enthralled with somehow subduing this rotten fucker, unleash the knowledge of the gates and have him face what he never could. That was until the world locked and he was ripped to the sky. Asterisk. Twilight sparkle. I knew it, I bucking knew you couldn't be trusted. Twilight screamed. Her throat felt like it was being rent, but she kept going. Her magic curled all around him in a vise of fluid metal. She lifted higher, and she twisted it. Just a tiny bit, just to make him understand what she could really do if she wanted, if she let herself. When he needed you most, you vanished. Twilight roared. You judged him even though he loved you, and you spat in his face. With every word she would jerk him, painfully, left or right, at speeds uncomfortable even for a Pegasus. But the man didn't let out a single sound, and it just infuriated her. The guards gulped nervously as they watched. Her brother, shining armor, was shouting from somewhere among them, but she didn't care to listen. The two other people who had been standing next to the man. Twilight could see the female looking at her, her long fingers splayed at her chest, at her heart, calling for mercy, perhaps? Did that man ever consider mercy before? Twilight, a voice cut through the static from behind her. Twilight turned and looked at Princess Celestia, standing blurred behind her. Twilight wiped the tears off her face. Please, my faithful student. Put him down. Gently. She couldn't put him down. He didn't deserve to be put down gently. He deserved harsher things. He just left Rigdan alone. Out there. He was supposed to be his friend. Twilight said, sobs escaping her. Her grip on her magic though, oh, that one remained steel. Princess Celestia's wing enveloped her, softly and quickly. White feathers, soft as clouds, smelling vaguely like sunshine on grass and jasmine tea. Safe, and protective, the wings were long and tall enough to hide Twilight from her surroundings as Princess Celestia lowered her head into the safe nest she made for Twilight. My faithful, greatest student. My sweet little pony. I know you are angry. And I understand. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't matter, nor will I ask you to, because it does. It always will. Twilight's breath hitched in her chest. But I ask you to stop. Because the results will not be what you want. Twilight shook her head, tears spilling freely, staining the pristine feathers around her. He left him. He. And hurting him, Princess Celestia interrupted gently, will not restore what was broken. Loyalty will not appear where it failed. Kindness won't return where it was abandoned. Twilight swallowed. She knew that, but still. I know that giving in feels like a solution, Princess Celestia said. It feels like it would be action. A balance, a kind of justice, the only justice you can give. But that is a false promise. Princess Celestia stepped closer, the other wing layering over the other, making their little hidden corner warmer. Princess Celestia continued. Even when it is ourselves we're angry at. Twilight blinked, tears falling non-stop. But it was wrong. She shouldn't have left Rigdan. He only loved her, he only wanted what was best for her, and she just ran and never thought of him again. But I don't know what to do, Twilight admitted. Princess Celestia smiled at her. Her magic sparkled, cleaning Twilight's face. What you always do, my dearest student, challenge the wrong answers. Discover the right ones and learn them. Mourn what was lost, accept their passing, and begin the journey that seeks to stop the hurt. It was hard to even think of disappointing such trust from anyone, much less her beloved mentor. She gazed into Princess Celestia's smile. It wasn't one of warmth, but more like one of tired faith. Forgive him then? Forgive myself? Twilight asked. Would forgiveness be absolution? Princess Celestia asked. Twilight thought. It felt like a test, a question she knew the answer to. She thought of warm beds and candlelight, darkness and stars outside her window, while a large figure recited stories from memory at her bedside of lands and people who never were. Many who live don't deserve it, Twilight said quietly, frowning as she searched for the words. And some who die, don't. The wizard in the story couldn't give life, no one could, so he asked not to be quick to judge and hurt. It wasn't the answer Princess Celestia had been expecting. She blinked in surprise before gracing Twilight with a proud smile. She had liked that line. Twilight had always hoped that the little misshapen being would find a good ending, and she even asked Rigdan once to tell it as if it did, though he refused. Even though it didn't happen, Twilight loved that the chance was given. Besides, now that she had more control of herself, Twilight couldn't continue what she had been doing. It left her feeling unlike her. It left her feeling the way she had as a filly, begging a story to end differently, knowing that the little being would not choose correctly. The creature in the story couldn't hear her. But Twilight was not a story, and she could choose to reject cruelty, for any reason, as a conclusion. No matter how inviting it felt, it would be to indulge, just this once. She lowered him down gently as Princess Celestia unfolded the wings around her. Twilight would forgive, not because it didn't matter. Not because it didn't hurt or was not important. But because she refused to be what she wailed against. Incidentally, Princess Celestia spoke again, pointing with her wing as the male friend caught the blonde man by his foot. You will have to tell me how you managed to do that. Twilight blinked. Her magic was around the golden-maned man. Strong as ever, holding him with ease. Experimentally, she gently used her magic to tap softly at the other two. They were there. Her magic felt them being there. They weren't absent. They were not black holes. Her grip on the man broke, dropping him the last few centimeters. Twilight glanced around frantically, looking for Rigdan, and he was gone. Again. Author's notes. YouTube link in video description. Everything we've done has made us all that we have been and we've become. Oh, we are now alone, everyone's gone and now we're without a home. We have destroyed both of our lives. Brother, we were left to be each other's purpose. Brother, my sentinel, the tempest is upon us. We are now each other's responsibility. All alone in spite of everything that's true. I have everything to do with you. We all failed to stop what came to pass. Winter's come and everyone will sleep at last. All to gain. No return to no remains. Past the point. The Rubicon denied us choice. This is a call to action. This is a call to arms. All lives for one, together. There are no false alarms. Come with me. Come with me. All my love is half the page. It's opening. Uncontained. This is a call. This is a call. All lives as one. All lives as one together. End of author's notes. End of, for even the very wise cannot see all ends.